A lot of people have been saying, oh, Valve, they're not interested in esports. They don't pay any attention. Valve don't care. They've abandoned the game. Why would they care about the esports of their cash cow? And of course, that's just not true. They've been watching the whole time. And one of the things that was brought up was, wait, haven't ESL and some other tournament operators, haven't they fucked up with the deadlines for the schedule? Because if you remember, when we moved into the brave new world of 2025, which was, we are going to have a Valve ranking system that determines invites, no more RMRs, regional major qualifiers, none of that. It's all going to be done by invite based on what you do over a period of time. And also, we're going to have a set calendar that's going to be announced in advance, ideally years in advance. For instance, people are going to be pitching for the 2027 majors right now because we've already got 2026 is all wrapped up. So that's where we're at, right? They want to have a better system in place for everyone that engages with the esports aspect of the ecosystem. And naturally, it's a big culture shock to TOs because I can tell you, as someone who's worked in the talent pool, sometimes you don't find out what event you're working until like 3-4 weeks before it's out. Or dates might suddenly shift on you and you've just got to live with it. You've just got to, roll the dice. So they're trying to create a cohesive calendar, but the problem is nobody's used to this. So it is absolute chaos, particularly in some of the, let's say, lower stature LAN events. But let's get there gradually, and let's just start with the first thing. There was actually a Reddit thread. Some dude made a Reddit thread saying ESL, I think it might have been Blast as well, but don't quote me on that. But certainly it was ESL. Some tournaments haven't announced their dates to the degree that Valve wanted them to. They're not in compliance with the new Valve rules. What's Valve going to do about it? And everyone in that fucking thread was like, snitch energy. Like, oh, won't somebody think of ESL? Snitch energy. It was ridiculous. And it's like, okay, well, it's probably a good idea to keep these tournament operators honest and probably like to have them respect the rules and implement everything in advance so the scene works. But okay, Reddit, you have your moment so you can mock somebody. But anyway, then Valve went and actually did something about it, and this is what they did. This is a report on HLTV. Valve issues warning to TOs over missed deadlines. HLTV has been made aware of an email sent by Valve to tournament organizers reiterating parts of the tournament operating requirements that came into force as of 2025. These requirements were necessary to follow for tournament organizers to be granted a license for hosting events. HLTV has reached out to all tournament organizers concerned, but have not received any responses as of yet. In the email, Valve specifically reiterated the deadlines by which organizers were required to announce certain information regarding their events and stated they would have to explore penalties if these requirements were not addressed immediately. At this moment, a raft of events set to run in 2025 are missing location information as per Valve's requirements, and the organizers would presumably be at risk of invoking the penalties mentioned by Valve. The information location needs to be announced a year in advance for Tier 1 events and 2 months for Tier 2. And then you go, okay, the tournaments with no announced location past the deadline include, and you're going to go, won't be a lot, will it? And it's like, well, it's a fair bit. IEM Spring in April, didn't have a spot. Blast Rivals in April, didn't have a spot. Star Ladder Star Series Season 19, which we're all expecting that event to be cancelled. Little bit of info on that, because it is out now. It definitely is out now. I'm not the spoiler. Star Ladder's got that major after Austin, and it's going to be in Budapest, Hungary. And I think what they wanted to do, what I got told behind the scenes was, they wanted to run a test run to see if they've still got it, if the Budapest infrastructure was going to hold up, etc. And they were going to run that Star Ladder Season 19 as a sort of dry run for the major in Budapest as well. Well, that looks like that's not happening. So fingers crossed they do still got it if they're going to be doing the major. Again, listen, Star Ladder, love you. Give me a call. I'll come. I'm a good pair of hands. We'll see. Anyway, ESL Pro League Season 22. We know that Pro League wasn't going to be in Malta. Spoiler, we now know it's going to be in Sweden, but that wasn't announced. The Thunderpick World Championship Finals, formerly in Berlin, if memory serves me correct, and Blast Rival Season 2 in November. None of those had a location that could be attached. And in 2026, the Blast Bounty, that's going to start off the year in January, that didn't have a place attached. And then it goes on to say the following tournaments have had the country they will be played in announced. So we're down to a country, but nothing more specific. And it does state that Valve's rules don't state how specific the location announcement has to be, but I would imagine it can't just be country, because if I say to you, yo, Valve, I'm going to run a tournament in February, it's going to be in Portugal. Can you name the city? Nah. Venue? Nah. Okay, well, sure it's all going to be fine. No, obviously it's going to have to be. It's going to have to be the full Monty, the full beans, you might say. You might even want to book these things so far in advance. You get some sort of discount, you know? Who knows? I'm sure that's how venue booking works, actually, but whatever. And that includes the Sky Esports Souvenir in February, the Sky Esports Masters in May, Sky Esports Championship in September. You're going to see a trend here. The CS Asia Championships in October, and the Sky Esports World Tour in November. The text of the email is as follows. We've been getting a few common questions about tournament requirements. These are just reminders and clarifications of the requirements that are already in place and are part of your tournament license agreement. 2027 Tier 1 events must be announced 2 years prior to the event start date. We're not issuing exceptions to this requirement. The additional information for your Tier 1 events must be fully announced 1 year prior to the event. Past that date, you need an exception to change any details of your event, including prize pool amounts and its allocation. The deadline for announcing 25-26 events is past. This includes making changes to your 2025-2026 event dates. The deadline for announcing additional information for 2026 is now rolling. Any changes to 2025 additional information requires an exception from us, Valve. Some announced 2025 Tier 1 events are missing some details like location, and this needs to be addressed immediately or we will have to explore penalties. We're happy to provide some guidance with respect to compliance, but please review the tournament operation requirements page again. We updated the page recently to make it a bit easier to follow and clarified some areas where there was some confusion. And I like this version of Valve. For a long time, Valve have been an absentee father. That's how we think of them. You know, the father that basically said, we're just going to go out for a bottle of milk and a pack of cigarettes, and here's an unbelievably lucrative gambling simulator that spits out toys. Have fun. And then they left, and then they went away, and we were like, oh, this is cool. Oh, look, yeah, I like this. And then we were like, but wait, couldn't we have more if Dada was here? And Dada, not referring to Idi Amin, former dictator of Uganda, referring to a child's almost onomatopoeic speech around the father figure in their lives. Dada has sort of returned and is putting their foot down, and I want it that way. I've always wanted Valve to be a little bit more hands-on than they have been, and so this is a good thing. Now, look, what are the point of rules if you're not going to religiously enforce them? Very good question. Let's move on. Let's not even pontificate too much on that. They've made it clear that there will be penalties. What penalties? Who knows? Do you want to find out? Do you want to find out, if you're a tournament operator, what a Valve penalty might look like, considering that penalty could be you never get the license for any of our games ever again? No, you don't fuck around. It is fuck around and find out. So that's perfect. People will not open the Pandora's box of Valve reprisals, put it that way. And that's what has certainly been happening. And good, we need more of this. Please, Valve, appoint somebody full-time to be the esports man at your company. It would be really, really good. So, as a result of this, ESL obviously got their shit together, and they came out and they made their announcement of all of the 2025 counterstrike calendar and where it's going to be. Now, bizarrely, Katowice is in Poland. Who knew? But the ESL Pro League Season 21, you can see it's going to be in Sweden. My understanding is, again, I don't know if this is accurate, but I think it might be the same studio they were having ESL Impact in, which I believe is in Stockholm as well, right? So I think they're using that studio space, so it isn't too much of an inconvenience. We're waiting on the IEM Spring still, which needs to get done. IEM Dallas, obviously. Cologne, Pro League Season 2, and then Chengdu. All good, all above board. We're all living the dream. That's all fine. So ESL have complied, and that's perfect. Valve also did another form of rule updating and rule enforcement that I like. Valve enforces major regional representation for multi-regional teams. Now, we've had some fun and games, haven't we? During the Drillers debacle, we've had some fun and games all talking about, oh, well, you could have Team Liquid pick up this player, suddenly they're in Asia, or you have this team and they pick up this player and suddenly they don't have to compete in Europe. And, we could have, I think Team Spirit, for example, because they've got Siberian players, they could qualify for Asia if they picked up one of the player from that area. So it's like everyone's been kind of memeing about, how could you get, into an easier region for your ranking points? And look, we all know Drillers tried to abuse an RMR and all the rules have been changed, but there was still scope for potential fuckery with being able to move between regions, get into easier regions that aren't necessarily the regions you truly represent. And in fact, you could be double dipping. You get all the benefit of being a big European organization when it comes to support, but you play in an NA region and you just smash, semi-pro shitters all day. Anyway, Valve have now come out to attempt to address that. And it used to be that if a team had no three-man majority and there was a tie between two regions that they could potentially represent, it was up to the team to choose. But that is no longer going to be the case following Valve's Thursday update. The part of the rulebook addressing regional assignment has been changed to say a team's region is determined by the region of the VRS from which they have been invited. Valve specified how this is handled for teams that appear in multiple VRS regions, such as Team Liquid, who now have 2 Americas players and 2 Asia players, and Wildcard, who field 2 Americas players and 2 European players. In the event that a team would be invited to a particular stage based on more than one regional VRS, they are considered to have been invited based on the region with greater representation in the major, so i.e. Europe, then America, then Asia. So it's in that order. This effectively means that such a team's assignment will be enforced depending on which VRS guarantees them an invite further into the major, and if they both lead to an invite to the same stage, they'll be assigned to the region with higher representation. And that will also apply to the newly introduced major regional qualifiers that replace the RMRs in the recent major expansion to 32 teams. As an example, should Wildcard be eligible for an invite in both America and Europe, they will be invited to play in Europe. And so you have to think about this from Wildcard's perspective. Wildcard, it's Amaranth's team. So the wildcard perspective is that they would probably bang out most NA teams right now as things stand. And with maybe the exception of Liquid, although... but they would feel very good and very confident playing in the NA region using the dregs of... that's so harsh. European talent to beat down on... worthless, semi-pro Americans. Look, this is all just rage bait. I don't really believe any of that. But, that's the principle. You get European players that can't get into European teams. You port them out to NA. You bang out, as long as you've got enough NA players to stay in NA, you bang out the NA with the Euros, and then you go and you represent NA and you come through the qualifier. It's essentially just a less egregious version of what the RMRs were essentially achieving. So this is great. It's great news. I love this. I love that Valve have had a bit of foresight this time. We're not having another Shanghai where, first of all, we've got a debacle of an RMR and then we're getting rules changed on the fly during the event. There is a bit of foresight and a bit of consideration going in. Well done. This deserves a lot of applause. But here's what I will say. Wildcard certainly didn't like it. They did a tweet. This was their response.
Oh, fuck.
Because, yes, indeed, they probably wouldn't beat a lot of European teams. It's certainly going to be a much harder road for them if that's the way that it goes, but it's probably the fairest path to ensure that people don't game the system. And what have we learned about majors? People will game the system for sticker money every single solitary opportunity that they can. There is no dignity. Just as a little side note, and by the way, let's get Shane Gillis with his, there we go, his little cheeky face. I love him. I love Shane Gillis. Isn't he great? But what I've also heard behind the scenes is Cloud9 and TSM are both going to be coming back with NA teams, and this could certainly be a factor in this decision, that the teams that have the European players that would traditionally dominate NA, they're going to be made to be in the European region. So it might kill mixed teams. It might mean a Euro gets dropped or a non-American player gets dropped. But this is the rumors behind the scenes, that they want to get teams together, even if it's a min-max thing, because Austin's round the corner. It was me all along, Austin. Everybody wants to, all the American orgs are going to come back for the hope of sticker money and a chance to play on American soil and, make American CS great again. So we shall see. We shall see if that comes to pass. But again, another great decision from Valve. Love it. Now, unfortunately... Oh, and just before we do go into the Tier 2 nightmare, because this is a little bit more convoluted, I'll just also play you a clip of Sponge from the Talking Counter podcast. Now, one of the things that Valve have come in for flack for, you may have noticed, is they haven't put everything that was in CSGO back in CS2. There was all these other game modes that no one played, right? And they're not there in CS2. And everyone's going, but I loved that game mode that no one played. I, for sure, was one of the people that played that game mode. I was there every day grinding that game mode with all my friends, and now I can't play it. I hate you, Valve. Give me my CSGO back. I miss my CSGO. CSGO was perfect game. Every single fucking day. Well, bit of bad news on this front, I guess. But listen, I'm going to just say this. I believe Valve should just put these shit modes that no one plays in, because they were there in CSGO, and you did take away CSGO. So it makes sense that, look, shit mode or not, more work or not, if you're going to take away something, it's fair enough to put it back. But Sponge, who I absolutely believe 100% on this, said he was having a chat with someone from Valve, and they are not going to be putting it back. So
greenlight all the updates.
In that case, I need to tell everybody that Danger Zone will not be making a return.
Ah, shit.
I'm actually serious about that.
Did you talk to them at the major?
About Danger Zone?
Just in general?
We did talk about it, but I can't say what they said.
Yeah.
We'll just keep an eye on Chad's Twitter, and you'll know what they said.
As far as I'm concerned, I don't think Danger Zone's coming back.
Cool.
But the guy that does the social media, he isn't just a social media guy, but he's not one of the devs who comes to the events.
Right.
So he's a different bloke than the 5 guys that we normally see.
Yeah.
So, sounds bad. You're not getting Danger Zone. So we're gaining on the esports. We're losing in the game. But that's fine anyway, because CS2 is broken. It's infested with cheaters everywhere. And it's not worth playing, right, guys? Even though it's the most played game on Steam. It's actually 40% of all players on Steam are fake. Just bots that are just botting for skins or leveling up accounts to sell to other cheaters. That's all it is, guys. Obviously, I know that because a cheat coder who's an inherently dishonest person said this through a voice changer to someone who isn't a journalist who made a YouTube video about it. So, I mean, if if you don't take that as facts, then what are you? What are you, a conspiracy theorist? We can now move on to the shit show all the way down in Scene 2, Tier 2. And Lewis Mira over at HLTV did a great report. He's been focused on this. And I wonder which way this was going to go, because obviously the new standards that Valve are setting are higher, and a lot of these tournaments are going to have a tough time with it, be they online, at LAN, online with LAN finals, whatever it's going to be. They're just diabolical. They're diabolically organized. They're quick turnover to get content out there to essentially advertise their partners, usually gambling companies. It's just like, how it is. And so he wrote an article called How Tier 2 CS Descended into Chaos in the New Games Era. It's pretty long, as you can see. I'm not going to get into all of it, but I will cover the broad strokes. And I strongly urge you to go give this a click, give it a read, support Mira's reporting over on HLTV. Valve announced in July 2024 a rulebook for hosting licensed events from 2025. It was supposed to mark the start of a new era in Counter-Strike, one without the partner leagues, right? Remember them? The fucking pseudo-franchise leagues that have made up most of the event calendar for years. Counter-Strike is at its best when teams compete on a level playing field and when ability is the only limit to their success, the developer argued. And yet, just 3 weeks into 2025, the invite process for Tier 2 CS events still lacks transparency. CCT Season 2, European Series number 16, and the Yala Compass event, the first Tier 2 events of the year in Europe, are facing intense scrutiny for their invites, with many teams overlooked despite meeting the ranking requirements laid out in Valve's regional standings. HLTV spoke with representatives of 10 of the European teams, which include Nexus, my favourite, Bombaclot, Partizan, Navi Jr., Zero Tenacity, Favbet, Apogee, Unity, Leo, and Rush B, and they were deemed ineligible for an invite by CCTV for Season 16. They all received an email from the tournament organizer that included the following passage. We are informing you today that according to Rule 4.3 of CCT's rulebook, we sadly cannot extend an invitation at this time. Section 4.3 of the CCT rulebook covers the tournament's invite exceptions, which range from a ban issued by the Esports Integrity Commission to simple misconduct, and these are the explanations laid out by CCT. You will not be invited if there is a rulebook violation or any misconduct, if the team or players are subject to a ban for integrity concerns by a third-party esports body, such as ESIC, or the team is subject to an active integrity flag, which identifies a potential risk to the integrity of the competition by the organizer, third-party esports bodies of Valve, or the team is subject to a ban or restrictions imposed by Valve. The core team roster, at least 3 players, differs from the roster published in the designated version of the VRS on the invite date. One organization fields multiple rosters that are eligible to receive an invite according to the designated version of the VRS. One or more players, including stand-ins, are under 16 years old, or any team, organization, or player of that team whose actions, affiliations, ownership, or reputation are reasonably deemed by the organizer or Valve to bring the tournament into disrepute. So it's pretty broad. There's many reasons why they can decline to invite certain teams. Now, whether or not Valve would put their foot down and go, whoa, if you want a license to run these tournaments, you got to stick to the VRS unless you can show us evidence of a reason why you wouldn't invite these teams. And certainly there are some teams that have had dubious histories and been accused of certain things, and people have implied that, they're up to no good or what have you. But we wouldn't know in the general public. It would be tournament operators, betting companies, odds makers, ESIC. They're the people that would know whether or not there was an active investigation running into these teams. And I would imagine that information would be fed to CCTV. Often CCT would be the ones raising the complaints. CCT would also then feed back that information to Valve, and Valve can then act accordingly. But there's been a lack of transparency around it, and essentially to just blanketly email these teams and say, we're not inviting you because these reasons may apply to you. I'm going to just be real. That's not acceptable for a tournament operator. You have to specify. You have to let these teams know the exact reasons why they're not allowed to attend. Remember, you're getting a license from Valve to run a tournament that's part of an official cohesive circuit with VRS points, right? That That was the theory, at least. More on that in a moment. And therefore, you have to comply to certain standards and practices. And Valve are very pragmatic. Valve understand the tournament operator needs to be able to run a tournament that makes sense for them. Valve also understands the ecosystem needs to be free from those who would poison it and bring integrity issues to the table. But they also understand you can't just go around banning players without a good reason and excluding them from it. Who are you? Riot Games? That's not how it works over here. So, obviously, lots going on. There was some melodrama. You can see here, you've got players crying about it. I spent my whole life trying to be better and I'm getting accused of something like this shit. I'm a religious person and it's not acceptable to be accused of something I didn't do. It's like someone is laughing at your face and trying to destroy you. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Fucking chill out on the melodrama. By the way, yeah, religious people would never do anything bad, said the Catholic priest to the child. Anyway, the problem CCT has had, ultimately, is they are operating a blacklist. We've known about the existence of a blacklist. I think the blacklist goes back to when we did all the reporting around Joel. Remember, he's the guy who I believe compared himself to Martin Luther King and Kobe Bryant, but, you know, whatever. There is a blacklist over at CCT. I'm going to say something very unkind, and no, people aren't going to like it. But whenever I get my betting alerts, whenever I see data about compromised games where there's suspicious betting activity, very often the letters CCT are in the fixture list. It's as simple as that. And whether or not that's something they're actively trying to stop, whether they've got a good handle on it, whether it is something they don't really care about, I don't know. I've never had a conversation with any of these people. I know Tier 2 CS is absolutely abundant with match fixing, and if they've got a blacklist and that's what they're using, then power to them, because very often all you're going to have, if you want to ban somebody from your league, is you're going to have, when they play in a team, a bunch of suspicious bets happen, and they all go the right way. And as I've said a million times talking about this topic, what no one ever seems to understand is, in esports, you don't just take a dive to win your money, i.e. you lose. People go, how can they have fixed the game? Because they won. I can get a live stream from a betting site, from a data partner, from even a member of the opposite team, and I can be on radar and know where everybody is and make all of the right calls. You know, like Akuma did. I can fucking do that. And it's very hard to detect. It just looks like everybody's playing well. Looks like everyone's got the read. It's never going to trigger a VAC ban. And I can bet on myself to win when I have one of those. And I can use it against a team that should absolutely smash me into oblivion. So what do you do about that? There's nothing you can do about that. You just have to tank that one. You just have to take it on the chin, right? So it's not just CCT, but Tier 2 is certainly rife with that kind of activity. Anyway, it goes on to talk about the blacklist, and it said, one source said Grid. Grid is a kind of like data analytics company that works with all of these tournament operators. One source said Grid has a communication channel with betting companies that is used to exchange information on abnormal betting patterns. Based on this, the integrity department assigns a specific category to each CS team, with the lowest category meaning the team should not be invited to tournaments regardless of their position in the ranking. We created a short list of the teams we wanted to invite, sent them to the integrity team, they rated the list, and then we started reaching out to the teams, the source said. This information was corroborated by another source. Grid has made no secret that it has built a large integrity database over the years. In an October 2022 guest article published on the Esports Insider, Jingje Luo, the company's head of integrity, wrote that Grid can assist against match fixing by collecting these data points. The database serves as a long-term project for Grid and provides further insights into match fixing patterns, hopefully allowing the company to identify teams with integrity concerns. So, once again, we find ourselves in a classic esports quandary. What is the right answer, guys? Is it the right answer to potentially ban innocent people because they played on teams where one or two people were fixing, or there were strange betting patterns around them, and maybe they didn't fix the game. Maybe they're totally innocent. It's just every time they play, there's a bunch of loony bettors that place big bets on them, win, lose, and they always happen to be right, and it's just all a coincidence. Or do we let people doing that, knowing that that is happening, compete not just in tournaments of this stature, but via the mechanism of the VRS? They will eventually earn invites by accruing VRS points to go to bigger tournaments, i.e. there's even more of an incentive to get into fuckery, not just for the betting now, but also to have access to higher prize pool, more money, etc., more status, potentially more sponsors, etc., etc. What do we do? Is there a right answer? Now, one of the things I'm going to do to kick this particular hornet's nest, and I'm very glad Lewis Mira got this out before I did this. It actually makes more sense that I sat on it for a while now. I have not one but two of those blacklists, and I've got their names on it. I've got the names of the teams, and I've got the names of the players, and it's the one that circulates to all the betting companies which players and which teams you shouldn't allow action on. You shouldn't give odds if these guys are playing. And by the way, it's that metric that CCT and many other tournaments are using to decide whether or not they invite those players. Now, I'm not saying any of those people are guilty, but I think it's in the public interest to publish that blacklist. And I'm going to publish that blacklist, and I'm probably going to have a bunch of people threaten me and threaten to sue me. So buckle up. It's going to be very interesting. Even though I'm not saying they're guilty, I am saying a document exists with your name on it, and this is the document, right? I'm not making any determination one way or the other, but somebody else has. Somebody's made a private determination. Hey, maybe if you're on that list, it'll give you an opportunity to clear your name with demonstrable evidence you don't engage in terrible behaviour. We shall see. But anyway, it sort of has to happen now that this is out there. These people want transparency. Everyone wants transparency. Once again, it's on me, Esports Jesus, to deliver that transparency. Anyway, it goes on to say that being flagged as an integrity risk can be career-ending for many players, given that CCT runs some of the biggest tournaments in the Tier 2 space. Moreover, another source said that other smaller tournament organisers often looked at CCT as a moral compass when it came to handing out invites. They thought that if a team isn't getting invited to CCT, there is probably something wrong with it. I'll also just say the way these invites have been handled is a complete clusterfuck. Very often there's allegations that teams are being invited because they will fix games and people are in on it. There's the other thing that happened, if you remember, when I wrote about that nutter, Yarabo, that fucking worked for ESIC for a few weeks and then said he'd uncovered a grand conspiracy where ESIC were covering things up and I was being paid someone else's salary to write promotional material for ESIC. And I spent hours talking to that guy, and for my efforts of hearing him out and listening to his mad ravings, he attempted to dox me, published my fucking phone number. Unbeknownst to him, I use burners when I talk to crazy people, so it didn't have much of an impact. It's just snap the SIM card, move on with your life. But that's what you get for listening to these psychopaths. And ultimately, what he was doing, he was blackmailing players by saying, listen, I know you fixed the game, and I'll tell organizations like CCT, you fixed the game, and they won't invite you, and because they won't invite you, other orgs won't invite you, and you'll never play in a Tier 2 tournament ever again. $500, please. That's what was going on. So this whole thing is a fucking mess, and Valve look, if you care about your sport, you need a healthy grassroots, and Tier 2 is essentially the grassroots, isn't it? You got to fucking crack down on all of that stuff. It does go on to say as well, Monty were blacklisted for several months. That was exactly the team Yarabo was blackmailing, by the way, before their good results earned them a second chance. That was way back. That was back, I think, when they had Wonderful, obviously airlifted into Na'Vi. Now, just to switch back before we move on to the other thing that's happened. All in all of the irregularities, the bullshit, the problems with CCT, turned out they all got stripped of their ranked status. And this is going to be a big blow to CCT moving forward. You can see Valve have instructed that HLTV to strip ranked status from all CCT events currently running, including the CCT Season 2 NA Series 4, due to irregularities discovered in the invitation process of the event. Importantly, HLTV is the data provider for the Valve ranking system, meaning the change on the coverage platform directly impacts Valve's own database. While HLTV's statement on the event page is sparse on details, the loss of ranked status is seemingly related to CCT electing to invite teams to the 3 CCT events currently via a selection process that is independent of the Valve ranking system. Importantly, all events in 2025 must use the VRS to determine invites to an event, with open qualifiers and wildcard invites being the only other valid methods to invite teams. With CCT seemingly being unaware of this requirement or deciding to forego it, this has landed them in hot water. And it lists these are the teams that are competing at their most recent American event. You've got such legends as Chicken Coop, Unjustified Impact. It appears that these 9 teams were all given direct invites by CCT to flesh out the group stage of the NA event, something disallowed under the current rules. With the event losing ranked status, it is unknown at the time of publication whether or not the events will continue as planned, or if the sudden loss of ranked status will cause teams to drop out of the CCT, or maybe CCT to cancel the event outright. And so that's obviously just their American event. But what they're talking about here in this report that Lewis Mira has written is, of course, they're doing the same thing here. Sorry, it wasn't Monty. It was Majesty. I knew it began with an M and was Ukrainian. So, yeah, Wonderful wasn't on Monty, but he was on a team called Majesty. Sorry, someone in the chat corrected me, so I have to correct myself on the video. Otherwise, someone will take a clip, make a Reddit thread about how I've impugned someone's reputation, impugned an org's reputation, or just don't know ball. Anyway, so back to the point, and that is that obviously if they're going to conduct themselves in the same way, what Valve are essentially saying with how they've handled the North American tournament that CCT has been running, they're going to say you've got to adhere to the VRS, or you're going to have to show us the receipts for not inviting these teams. And maybe the receipts aren't going to be good enough for Valve. I don't know what Valve's standard actually is in terms of what they want to see that would permit you to not invite someone based on VRS ranking. I think they need to clarify that a bit further, what the exceptions could possibly be, because suspected of integrity issues and being guilty of integrity issues, there's a huge gulf between those two things, and Valve might feel squeamish, about one and not the other. So we shall see. But certainly CCT, it's a mess. It's likely that these events, if they stick to the way they're currently doing the invites, they're going to lose their ranking designation, which, by the way, would ultimately end them and end a lot of the interest from those Tier 2 teams, because it's not just about prize money. The VRS is a mechanism through which you will get more prize money. Anyway, we come down because it doesn't end there. There was this crazy bit about Johnny Speed not being able to play in the tournament because they are flagged. Let me look at their former players, and I might be able to have a guess as to why. Yes, well. So, next up is the issues around Yalla Compass. Yalla Compass is another big money event. You have to believe it's a S-tier event when Mongols win it. Of course, it isn't, but it's a lot of money being put in to this space, I believe. Is this the United Arab Emirates, right? And this is the UAE project, I'm pretty sure. Well, anyway, you can see the invite processes for the different stages of Yalla Compass have also come into question, with at least 6 teams being overlooked for invites that would have been invited. Some of those teams were the same that CCT excluded: Navi Junior, Iberian Soul, formerly Koi, Fireflux, Unity, Copenhagen Wolves, they're still around, jeepers, and Spirit Academy. They all confirmed to HLTV that they were not invited to the tournament. 5 of those teams were ranked higher than Yano, BC Game, and Apogee, the 3 lowest ranked teams invited by Yala Esports on the day the invites were determined, December 18th. Moreover, Yala Esports defined the first 3 stages of Compass, Contenders, Main, and Playoffs as an open qualifier, despite them all being invite-only. This is another thing that Valve are absolutely adamant on. You've got to have your open qualifiers. You can't just invite people to your tournament anymore if you still want all of the benefits of the VRS and the ranking points and the Valve, blessing and all of that stuff. It's got to be off the rankings, and in some cases you've got to have these open qualifiers. You can't just throw out invites anymore. In the eyes of the organisers, this allowed them to take advantages of Valve's 3-1-2 rule, which states a licensee can use any criteria in good faith that are reasonable and transparent and do not specifically target individual rosters or teams. Acceptable criteria including demographics and region, e.g. female rosters based in Canada. But rather than running open qualifiers for teams from a certain demographic and region as a whole, Yala Esports claims it used a specific criteria for select invites that might include the country of origin and unique criteria such as best female team in the region, the organisers said. This is in violation of Valve's rulebook, as tournament organisers cannot use filtered versions of the VRS for Tier 1 events and their qualifiers. And then you ended up with Metasport. Metasport publicly said, we're going to pull out. And they put a statement out. And Metasport are obviously the Swedish organisation that have been, we talked about them. We talked about them during Rostermania. Yes, they're a decent Tier 2 team. They've got some upset scalps, to their name. And Yala Compass is exactly the kind of tournament that they would like to go to and have a relatively good run at and get like a pretty big payday for not a whole lot of much. Yes, of course. Well, they're pulling out, and they say in their statement, integrity are very important to us. So it's okay. Today, we have decided to withdraw from Yala Compass because of a lack of openness and accountability in their invitation process. Over the past few days, we've raised valid concerns with Yala Compass. Sadly, their answers have often been deflected, ignored, or even verge on gaslighting. No, not gaslighting. Everyone hates gaslighting. This goes against our values and the trust we want to build in the esports community. Valve's new system focuses on honesty and transparency as key for the industry's growth. We believe all organizations in this system should follow these principles to create a fair and professional competitive environment. Unfortunately, Yala Compass has done the opposite, and we had to make the tough decision to leave the tournament. Ultimately, there are going to be issues with these tournament operators that have essentially had it all of their own way in Tier 2 in regards to invites, in regards to standards and practices, in regards to prize money distribution. If you want to get all of the blessings of the Valve system and the Valve points and have the enticement that those bring for people to sign up, then you're going to have to play ball. And not a lot of organizations are kind of ready to do that. And Yala Compass certainly seemed to be another one, and probably on course, like CCT, to maybe lose their ranking points and have them stripped. Yala Compass did say in a statement to HLTV, this is Timo Koski, he was at another esports company. He's the Finnish dude. Was it Elisa? Yeah, I think he built the Elisa Masters and then left. Anyway, he said, at Yala Esports, we are committed to being a transparent and equal opportunity player within the counterstrike ecosystem. In line with our continued efforts to maintain openness and integrity across our business operations, the nature of Yala Compass Winter 2025 will now be reclassified as a standalone tournament in compliance with the regulations set forth by Valve, i.e. not part of the VRS. As the rules surrounding the invitation process continue to evolve for the benefit of the Counter-Strike community, we remain dedicated to ensuring our invitation process aligns with Valve's guidelines now and in the future. And then in a follow-up message, Koski said Yala Esports is working on a solution with Valve and hopes to provide an update shortly. So there's good and bad here. I like the fact that Valve are being absolutely rigid for the first time ever about what their esports circuit has to look like, and they are holding people accountable at both ends of the spectrum. if you're CCTV running Tier 2, you've got to get your shit together. Yalla Compass running Tier 2 with more money. You've got to get your shit together. ESL, get your shit together. Blast, get your shit together. And if you don't get your shit together, we're not going to turn a blind eye to it anymore. Enough's enough. You fucking bilked us with the partnered leagues. You're doing this fucked up Esports World Cup thing right in front of us. These are our games you're using to make all of this money. You are going to respect the rules this time around for the first time ever. And I'm all about that. It's been a long time coming. Remember, people talk about Valve and how vindictive and games developers and Valve can be and how you don't want to mess with Valve. These tournament operators have actually messed with Valve at every possible turn. You can mess with Valve. Lest we forget, what was it? 2014, 2015, they're trying to run an exclusivity league, ESL, and they deliberately set it up in Twitch's offices with all of the stakeholders, including gambling companies. What dates did they choose? The well-known public dates of Valve's annual holiday to Hawaii. They did it specifically to try and get it over the line when Valve weren't around to raise the alarms and maybe say, oi, what do you think you're doing? They were doing the old thing of it's better to ask forgiveness than beg permission. A journalist, some crazy journalist, somehow had sources, revealed it as it was happening. Sent it to Valve. Crazy how this works. I wonder what happened to that guy. Surely he must be beloved by the CS community now. But anyway, it's not just this. Another big event that nearly, funnily enough, won my Gonzo Award for worst event of the year was Sky Esports, which of course is the Indian event. Now look, ever since the H1B Groypers Marga versus Musk debacle, been a lot of racism towards my Indian brothers and sisters on online platforms. Hopefully everyone here is fucking decent enough to refrain from any cheap jokes. But the Sky Esports tournament was not great. They eventually got it together, but the first few days, pretty bad. Bet Boom withdrew from it, if you remember, or Team BB, as we have to call them. Well, you saw earlier, we're waiting. When are these dates? When are these venues? Well, the Sky Esports souvenir event is going to be cancelled. This is reporting on Dust 2 India, one of the Dust 2 verticals that survived the kind of downscaling that's been going on. Dust 2 India has received an official statement from Sky Esports stating that their upcoming $250,000 tournament, the Sky Esports Souvenir 2025, has been cancelled. Sky Esports has stated the tournament organizer applied to Valve to reschedule the event and introduce wildcard events, but with no response from Valve on the matter, they have taken the step to cancel the event. Sky Sports states that coupled with the current situation surrounding other events and concerns raised by the teams about the tournament potentially becoming unranked, we are left with no choice but to cancel the Sky Sports Souvenir 2025. I'm just going to say on this front, another thing a lot of people are going to do is they're going to leave it on Valve's doorstep and they're going to say, well, we wrote to Valve and we didn't get a reply. Valve probably don't have time to reply to every tournament operator. That's not an excuse. I'm just saying. They should have someone that is going to reply to every tournament operator dedicated. Just as their company and their esports involvement is set up right now, they don't. But also, they have already given a public fucking edict about what you need to do. They've been very clear. They've directed you to the instructions. It's on you to follow the fucking instructions. And if you're not following the instructions or you're incapable of following the instructions, then fuck you. What's happened here is they said, we tried to reschedule. Valve said you can't reschedule. There will be no rescheduling. You would need an exception from us to reschedule. Did you get one? No. Okay, right. So are you running the event? Well, no, because now some of the people we thought were going to come are worried that we're going to have our VRS ranking taken away from us. So we're cancelling the whole thing. Now, I said right at the start of, it was back when this was announced in the summer of 24. I said as soon as this came out and we were looking at this big unified calendar, I said don't worry about it being crowded. The events are going to cancel. There's going to be some events that are just going to cancel. They're going to drop out. They're not going to be able to hang. And that's just the reality of where we're at. You have to understand that no matter how much you try and modernize esports, we are still at a place where the average tournament operator can barely run an event. I mean, barely. You know, just if you haven't read it, I urge you to go to Substack and read how bad the worst esports of the year event was, which was the Global Esports Tour in Rio, right? And you can see the illustrious previous winners, Gaming Paradise. But this event was mental, and it's resulted in a government investigation to go into where's the money gone. How did you fuck up this bad when you were given nearly $750,000 from the Brazilian state? And that's the other part of, if you take money from governments, they're not like venture capital. All that venture capital you piss up against the wall, they're just like, okay, easy come, easy go. Governments want to know where you're fucking spending the money, because at the end of the day, politicians are like, well, we could have embezzled that ourselves. Which is a joke, probably. So I urge you to read that and understand just how bad even in 2024 and 2025 tournaments can get. And people aren't very well organised, and they're not up to snuff, and they can't do things on the fly and adjust at short notice. And obviously Sky Esports is still a relatively young tournament operator. It probably is better to just cancel the event and then actually roll the dice on running another terrible event, given how much attention their previous event got last year. And look, I want a thriving Indian scene. It's one of those, it's always been a huge market for CS, going back to like 1.6. Lots of people play Counter-Strike and have an interest in Counter-Strike. It's obviously a huge country with lots of interested, upwardly mobile young people that like esports the same as what we do. It could be potentially a huge market. The problem is everyone has cynically tried to engage with that market and draw attention to that market for their own profiteering. You know, when I think about Optic India and what a disaster that was and how far that set back the Indian scene. Because remember, only one of their players cheated, and Optic dropped the entire team at a short notice and then pretended it never happened. So, you know, you got to feel sorry for genuine Indian esports fans. They haven't had a lot to look forward to. Sky Esports comes along. It pledges to be this big global tournament. We're going to build up over time. We're going to bring in teams from all over the world. We're going to get official Valve ranking points. Some people are going to roll the dice and come here. Yeah, well, not now. When we're cancelling events. And we're going to wait and see what happens next. So not a great time for those guys, but honestly, as I said, a great time if you genuinely care about the health of the Counter-Strike scene. This is exactly the type of rigid attention to detail that Valve have needed to put into their esports product for the longest time, and now that it's here, it can only be a good thing. So going back to Big Head to wrap this up, look, I know that some people are going to have like a lot of concerns about where this is going. And the most important takeaway from this, if you don't take away all of it, just take away this. We're at an impasse in terms of, can you as a tournament operator issue your own penalties to teams that you believe have violated integrity and or rules around your tournament that you maybe can't prove, or do you have to give everyone the benefit of the doubt and listen to Valve? Because that's a problem. Because, as I said, in Tier 2, it's an absolute fucking sewer. It's an absolute sewer. And I know some of those names. And I've seen the blacklists, and I'm going to publish them, and I understand and I sympathise with, if you're running a tournament, you're seeing suspicious betting patterns during a game whenever a team with a certain player in it plays, then you should be allowed to just ban that player you used to be under no obligation to have to invite them. And I've seen people already saying, this is terrible, banning players without giving them a reason. I mean, that's literally what Riot were doing. That's literally what loads of tournaments have done when it comes to invite tournaments. You're not guaranteed. It's what Twitch rivals do. You're not guaranteed to go. If you don't get involved, you don't get involved. But with Valve now being the arbiters of who does get to go, the downside is independent penalties like that. Well, yeah. Maybe you don't get to issue them anymore. Maybe knowing somebody's engaging in match fixing isn't good enough anymore if you can't prove it to Valve. And keep in mind, as someone that's had to prove match fixing to Valve in the past, the evidentiary standard is pretty fucking high. And you have to get their interest first and make them look at it. So, I don't know. But overall, Valve's involvement in the space, in the scene, is a good thing. As I said on the Four Horsemen episode we did with Jason Lake, where I was talking about where I see the health of CS moving forward, I think 2025 is looking way better than 2024, 2023. The start of CS2 was in a much better place, just in terms of the tour, the circuit, than the end of CSGO was. The death of partnered leagues is a boon to everybody, and this encourages competition, and it encourages choice, and it encourages teams to pick and choose their events the more that benefit them, without just having to blindly go because you've got a contractual obligation with what the tournament operator that's running it. So I'm about it. We'll see where it goes, but Tier 2, it's a mess. We got a long way to go.